in these chapters, they go back and explain how the tribe of Dan came to not keep the land that they were allotted and took the land in the north instead. Remember, we've already talked about that, how they didn't take their land because it was too hard. They didn't want to work for it. God told them that he would help them in the fight against the Philistines in their land, but they didn't want to do that. It was too hard, and they decided instead that they would go up north. And this is the story of them going up north and getting their land. And we want to do this story before we go to the Judges because it happened before the Judges. So in chapter 17, we're going to talk about one man and his family. And 18 is when we'll talk about Dan, the tribe of Dan. But the reason we have to talk about this man in chapter 17 is because the tribe of Dan has to do with him. So in chapter 17, we learn this story about a man named Micah, who it says in the very beginning of the chapter, took some money from his mother. He took $1,100 from his mother. And at the first of this chapter, it says that he goes to his mom and he says, hey, remember that money that you were missing and you were cussing everybody and frustrated because you couldn't find this money? You thought someone stole it. Well, it was me. I stole your money and I want to give it back to you. And then this mother has a very odd response. Her response to her son is, blessed be my son by the Lord. I don't know if she's blessing him because, like a mom, she's just like, oh, thank you for telling the truth. I'm so glad. And so she's praising him for telling the truth. I don't know if she's just happy that she's got this money now that she thought was lost. I don't know what her blessing to her son is about. But that was her first response. And it's kind of indicative of why her son doesn't do anything right. She obviously has a skewed view because after this, she says, of that money that I now have found that I thought was lost, I'm going to give some of that money to the Lord for Thanksgiving because I found my money now. And that sounds great. Except for we realize the way she's giving it to the Lord is by giving it to a man to make a carved image for her son so that he can worship at his own house and not go down to the tabernacle like everyone else. And so she's just messed up all the way around. So she gives 200 also. She says, I'm going to give this money to the Lord. And then she only gives 200 of the 1,100. And the man makes this carved image. And then she gives this carved image to her son Micah. And it says Micah made a shrine, which that word literally means a house of God. So instead of going down to the tabernacle in Shiloh, where everyone else is worshiping, where God commanded them to go and worship, he says, too far away. I don't really want to do that. Let's just make my own house of God here. And so he makes this carved image and he decides he's going to worship God in his own house so he doesn't have to travel very far. So he's taking the easy way right from the beginning, right? And then he makes his son a priest. He anoints his son as a priest so that he has a priest to, do all of the things presumably that the priest would do in the tabernacle. And so he's already broken 3 of God's laws right here off the bat because the second of the 10 commandments is not to make any carved images for yourself. And that's what he's done. So he broke that commandment. And then they're all supposed to go to Shiloh. They're not supposed to have their own personal houses of worship. They're supposed to gather together at the tabernacle because this is where the presence of the Lord is. And so they didn't have the Holy Spirit at that time dwelling within every believer. And so they went to the house of God because this is where God's Spirit was. And they would worship there. They would make their sacrifices there. And the priests were the ones that offered the sacrifices. But not just anybody could be a priest. And this man is from the tribe of Ephraim. And so his son is from the tribe of Ephraim. The Ephraimites were not not supposed to be priests. The only people that could be priests were from the tribes of Levi, and only the clan of Kohathite could be priests, the descendants only of Aaron. So he's just breaking all kinds of rules. He's not supposed to have his own personal priest. He's not supposed to have his own personal house of worship. He's not supposed to have carved images. And he's done all of these things on top of the fact that his son isn't even supposed to be a priest, even if he could have his own personal priest. And then the last of the chapter tells us that he sees this man walking down the road one day, and he asks the man, "Hey, who are you? What are you doing?" And it says, the man says, "I'm a Levite of Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm looking for a place to stay." And Micah's like, "Great, I've been needing a priest, and you're a Levite. I'll make you my priest. Will you be my priest? And then I'll pay you money every year, and I'll give you clothes and a place to stay, and I'll provide for all your needs if you'll just stay here and be my priest. You want a home? I have a place for you to stay." This all works out perfectly. And presumably he thought this was a better idea than his son being a priest, which, I mean, I guess it is, but none of it makes any sense because, again, you're supposed to be from Aaron's line in order to be a priest, and we don't know if this man is yet or not. And he also, why is he wandering around? Because each one of the clans was designated a city to live in, depending on which clan they were from. That was the tribe that they would live. And Bethlehem wasn't even one of the Levitical cities. So he's leaving from Bethlehem, which he should never have been in the first place. And he's searching for a place to live, which he only has a couple of tribes, depending on which clan, that he can choose from to live in the Levitical cities. And so the whole thing is weird. We don't quite understand it. Maybe he was on his way to his actual tribe that he was supposed to be living with and then just got caught. But the whole thing is strange. And then, like I said, we don't know if he is an actual priest or just from the tribe of Levi. And he's not supposed to be a personal priest to anyone anyway. He's supposed to only work in the tabernacle if he's a priest, and then serve the Lord, not one specific person, serve the whole community. On behalf of the community, he's serving the people and God. He's kind of their mediator. That's what a priest is supposed to do. Not be paid like a hired hand, right? Like Micah's trying to do. But he agrees, and so he becomes his priest. So all of this to say that the tribe of Dan comes into play in chapter 18. So Dan is decided that it's too much work to take the land that was allotted to them by Joshua, which God was the one who told Joshua to give them that land. And they're like, "I know you said you're going to help me and everything, but it's really a lot of work. Wouldn't it be just better if we could just find another place to live, some place that wasn't so hard, so we didn't have to fight so long? I don't want to do this," right? And so the tribe of Dan, it says, was camping also in the land of Judah. And they send out 5 scouts and say, "Go search the land. See if you can find us a better place to live, somewhere easier we don't have to fight for." And these scouts stumble upon Micah's house. That's why Micah's story comes into play. And Micah allows them to stay at their house while they're searching the land out. And then they hear the voice of this Levite, and they recognize it because they were both from the land of Judah. And so they must have seen each other at some point. And so they're like, "What are you doing here? What's going on?" And this Levite praises Micah and says, "Well, I was looking for a place to live, and this man gave me a place to live and let me be his own personal priest. And so I get paid by him, and I live here, and everything's going good for me." And they're like, "Wonderful. I'm so glad to know that you are a priest. Will you please ask God if he endorses this way that we're going, if he'll bless us, if we're going to be successful in finding a new place to live?" Well, this is what I was telling y'all earlier, right? Is that they started out on this way before they ever even asked God. Because if they would have asked God, God would have said, no, go fight for the land that I already gave you. I told you I would help you. Don't take the easy way out and go look for another place. Go fight for this land. So they didn't ask God, but now that they're already doing this, they've already decided to go a different way. They're like, hey, ask if God will bless this idea that we have of finding this new piece of land. And in chapter 18, verse 6, it says that the priest says to them, yes, go in peace. The journey on which you go is under the eye of the Lord. Well, that kind of sounds like, yes, he blesses this way, but that's really not what he says, right? He says, your journey is under the eye of the Lord. Well, it means God's watching you. If I'm doing something wrong, I don't really want to know that God's watching me, right? But he gives the impression that God is fine with this. And we have no record of him talking to God, asking if God is fine with this. He just tells them that God's fine with it. And so they go on their way. Well, as they're going on their way, they come upon this town named Laish. And this is verse 7. It says, the 5 men departed and they came to Laish and they saw the people who were there and how they lived in security after the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and unsuspecting, lacking nothing that is on the earth and possessing wealth. And how they were so far from the Sidonians and they had no dealings with anyone. And so they went back down south to their brothers and they said, hey, we found a perfect piece of land. And here's what they say. They say in verse 10, the land is spacious and God has given it into your hands, a place where there's no lack of anything that is on the earth. So we found this perfect piece of land. These people are unsuspecting. They're living all by themselves. Nobody's even around to help them. They're perfect target. So let's go up. Let's kill these people, take their land. And so the rest of the tribe is like, great, let's go do that. And so they get 600 men, arm them, and send them north. And then as the men are on their way to this city, it kind of casually mentions that they stop in the chief Gibeonite city and name this area that they camp the Camp of Dan. And then they go and they stay in Micah's house again. And while they're there, the 5 scouts tell them, hey, this guy, by the way, he has his own house of God. It's got a carved image and household gods, and he has his own priest, everything. Let's take his stuff. And the tribe of Dan says, sounds great to me. And so all of the army distract the Levite at the gate, and the 5 men go into the house of Micah and take all of his stuff. Well, then as they're leaving, the Levite sees and he says, hey, wait, what are you doing? And this is their response to them. It's kind of funny the way that they word it. He says, this is verse 19, and they say to him, keep quiet. Put your hand on your mouth and come with us and be to us a father and a priest. Is it better for you to be a priest to the house of one man or to be the priest to a tribe and a clan in Israel? And it says that this made the priest's heart glad. And he said, I'll go with you. So 5 seconds ago, he was praising Micah, saying how he's given him this money and given him this job and a place to live and all of these things are great. And now he's betraying him for a better, more prestigious job. Not just a priest to one guy, but to the whole clan, even though he's not even supposed to be a priest at all. And so he just totally betrays Micah. They steal his stuff and they go out on their way to Laish. Well, they put all of these things in front of them. Their women and their children also go in front of them. And then the men stay back because they're sure that Micah's probably going to chase them, right? And sure enough, he does. And when he comes upon them, this is what they say to him. This is so crazy. In verse 23, it says, they turn around and they look at Micah and they say, hey, what's the matter with you? Why do you come to us with such a great company? Because he came with other men. And he says, you take my gods and You take my priest and then you ask me what's wrong with me? Why do I come at you like this? Why am I mad? Are you serious? Of course I'm mad. You took all my things. And they're completely unfazed by this. They say, hey, don't let your voice be heard among us again, lest angry fellows fall upon you and you lose your life and the lives of your household. So they're like, don't talk to us that way. We can do whatever we want. And if you want to gripe about it, we'll just kill you. And we'll kill all of your household too. And so Micah has no option. He just has to leave because he knows that he's no match for them. They're 600 plus men and he's got his household basically with him. And so he has to go away empty-handed without his priest, without his God, without his place to worship, and they take everything he's got. And so after Micah runs away with his tail between his legs because they're a bunch of bullies, then they go on to this other town, this unsuspecting, vulnerable town, and they kill everyone. And then they burn the whole city and then resettle in it, rebuild, and make this town their own, even calling it Dan as if it's the place that God gave them in the very first place, right? And so you really do act like just a bunch of bullies to every single person. They're just, forcing their way in. And then at the very end of the chapter, we find out that they set up this carved image and make their own house of God and make Micah's priest their priest, and he stays their priest for all the time that they're living free in the land. And so are his sons. They all his family becomes their priests. And we also find out that he is from the tribe of Gershon, which is not a priestly tribe. And it's also not the tribe that was allotted to Dan in the first place. The Kohathites were the ones that were supposed to be living in Dan's land. But of course, this isn't the same land that was Dan's anyway. So the whole thing is messed up. Every single person is taking the easy way out, doing things the way they want to do them instead of the way God wants them to do them. This land that they've taken is the furthest north of any occupied land. It is within what God had promised to them, but they haven't gone far enough north yet to conquer all of the land. And presumably, they should conquer the people living within their land that are right beside them, that are worshiping other gods right there in their midst, as opposed to going further north and conquering people that are seemingly minding their own business, not any temptation to them to worship their gods or anything else. If anyone is going to defeat them, it should be the tribe of Naphtali or Manasseh, somebody that's there in that area and expanding their territory north like God told them to do in the first place. But not these people, not Dan. This is not their job. And they're just looking for an easy way to, take land and not take what God had asked them to take. And so every single person in this story took the easy way out, right? Micah, too lazy to go down to Shiloh to worship. He'll just make his own house of worship, at his own place, do his own thing. Dan, don't want to fight the people that God told me to fight, take the land that he gave me as a gift. I'd rather just go up here and these people that have no chance. They're vulnerable. They have no one to help them. It'll be easy. It's perfect land. There's nothing at all wrong with it. It's got everything we need. And so everyone is taking the easy way out. And it's easy for us to look at them and be like, what a bunch of bullies and horrible people, right? What a bunch of lazy people just taking the easy way out. But we're all tempted to take the easy way out. And we also may worship in a way that is more about us than about God, right? These are two things that we can be tempted to do.